The evening of August 21st, 1986, started like any other for the villagers around Lake Nyos in Cameroon. But around 9 p.m., a strange, rumbling sound echoed from the lake. A white mist began to rise from the water. One farmer who heard it felt a sense of unease and decided to go to bed. By the next morning, the birds were silent, and 1,146 of his neighbors were dead. They had all been suffocated by an invisible killer that crept out of the lake while they slept. This is the story of one of the most bizarre and terrifying natural disasters in modern history. It's a mystery that baffled scientists and left a scar of fear that remains to this day. So how could a lake become a mass murderer? To figure that out, we have to piece together the terrifying events of that night and the incredible investigation that came after. If you're fascinated by the Earth's hidden dangers, consider subscribing for more stories about historical mysteries and strange natural phenomena. The few survivors who woke up on August 22nd were met with a profound and eerie silence. No birds chirping, no insects buzzing, just nothing. Those who had survived, mostly by living on higher ground, walked out into a living nightmare. In the villages of Nyos, Kam, Cha, and Subum, it was as if life had simply stopped. Bodies lay exactly where they had fallen, in their homes, on footpaths, and in the fields. There were no signs of a struggle and no visible injuries. Over 1,246 people and 3,500 cattle and other livestock had died, many in the middle of their evening routines. One survivor, Joseph Nquine, recalled waking up after being unconscious for hours to find his entire family gone and his body covered in strange sores. Like the other 4,000 or so inhabitants who managed to flee, he was completely bewildered. The lake itself had transformed. Its once clear blue water was now a deep, rusty red. A wave, much like a tsunami, and estimated to be at least 25 meters high, had crashed against the shoreline, stripping away plants and trees. A strange, foul odor hung in the air. As the first responders and aid workers arrived, they were stunned. What kind of weapon, or what kind of natural force, could kill on such a massive scale, so quietly, without leaving a single trace of violence? The world's scientific community turned its full attention to this remote corner of Cameroon, determined to answer the terrifying question: what happened at Lake Nyos? In the days that followed, the scene around Lake Nyos was one of utter chaos. The few survivors suffered from frightening symptoms, including respiratory problems, confusion, and temporary paralysis. Scientists from all over the globe descended on the area, each with their own theory. Was it a secret chemical weapons test? A toxic gas release from a volcanic vent? Or something else entirely? Something new and unknown? The first big clue was the victims themselves. The cause of death for nearly all of them was asphyxiation. They had been suffocated by something that had simply pushed all the oxygen out of the air. The second clue was the lake. Lake Nyos isn't just a normal lake. It's a deep crater lake, formed in the mouth of an inactive volcano. This unique geological setting turned out to be the key to the whole mystery. A team of scientists, including American researcher George Kling, began analyzing the lake's water. They discovered that the bottom layers of the lake were incredibly rich with dissolved carbon dioxide, or CO2. Deep beneath the lake, about 80 kilometers down, a pocket of magma continuously leaks CO2 into the groundwater that feeds the lake from below. This led them to a terrifying theory, a rare natural event known as a limnic eruption. This wasn't a volcanic eruption with lava and ash. It was an eruption of gas. The lake had, in effect, exploded. But how? How could a lake build up enough gas to suffocate thousands of people? And what could have possibly set it off? The easiest way to understand what happened is to picture a can of soda. The CO2 that makes it fizzy is dissolved in the liquid under intense pressure. As long as the can is sealed, the gas stays put. But if you shake it and pop the top, the sudden drop in pressure makes the gas violently escape in a fountain of foam. Lake Nyos was like a giant natural version of that soda can. For decades, maybe even centuries, the deep waters of the lake had been absorbing huge amounts of CO2 leaking up from the Earth's crust. The immense pressure at the bottom of the lake, which is over 200 meters deep, kept all that gas trapped in the cold, dense water below. The lake was stratified, meaning a stable layer of warmer fresh water on top acted like a cap, preventing the gas-charged water from ever reaching the surface. But on August 24, 1986, something broke that seal. The exact trigger is still up for debate. The most popular theory is a landslide on one of the lake's steep inner walls, which plunged into the deep water and disturbed the layers. Other ideas include a small earthquake, a minor volcanic event on the lake bed, or even a sudden change in water temperature from cool rainwater. Some scientists now think an external trigger wasn't even needed, that the water had become so supersaturated with gas it was just waiting to erupt on its own. Whatever the cause, the result was a catastrophic chain reaction. As the deep, CO2-rich water was forced upward, the pressure on it dropped. Just like opening the soda can, the dissolved CO2 began to erupt violently out of the water. This set off a massive fountain of water and foam, estimated to have shot 100 meters into the air. This eruption released an unbelievable amount of gas. Some sources estimate as much as 1.6 million tons of carbon dioxide. Because CO2 is about 1.5 times denser than air, this invisible plume didn't just float away. It crashed back down to Earth and began rolling down the surrounding hills with terrifying speed, with some estimates saying the initial cloud rose at nearly 100 kilometers per hour. It hugged the ground, flowing into the valleys where the villages were nestled. It was a silent, odorless wave of death that displaced the very oxygen people needed to breathe. Within minutes, anyone caught in its path suffocated. The Lake Nyos disaster was a horrifying wake-up call. Scientists quickly realized this wasn't a one-of-a-kind event. Just 2 years earlier, in 1984, a nearby, smaller crater lake called Monoon had released a similar gas cloud that killed 37 people. It was clear that Nyos and other lakes like it were ticking time bombs. The CO2 was already starting to build up again. Another eruption wasn't a matter of if, but when. An urgent international effort began to find a way to make the lake safe. Some of the early ideas were pretty drastic. One was to drop bombs into the lake to force a controlled release, but that was quickly dismissed as being far too risky. The winning solution came from a team of French scientists led by Michael Halbwachs. Their idea was both simple and brilliant: create a permanent, controlled way for the lake to release its gas. The plan involved sinking a large pipe deep into the gas-rich bottom layers. They would pump water up the pipe just to get it started, and then physics would take over. As the deep water rises, the decreasing pressure causes the CO2 to form bubbles. This bubbly, less dense mixture then rushes to the surface on its own, creating a self-sustaining siphon, a fountain that would continuously and safely vent the dangerous gas. After successful tests, the first permanent degassing pipe was installed in Lake Nyos in 2001. It worked, creating a steady plume of water and gas shooting into the air. With funding from the United Nations, 2 more pipes were added in 2011 to speed up the process. Lake Monoon was also fitted with a similar system. For the first time since the disaster, it seemed like these killer lakes could finally be tamed. Today, the degassing pipes at Lake Nyos are still doing their vital work. By 2019, scientists confirmed the system had removed enough CO2 that the lake was no longer in danger of another massive eruption. In fact, just a single pipe is now enough to keep the lake permanently safe, operating as a self-powered, perpetual fountain. However, the area isn't completely without risk. The natural dam holding back the lake's water is eroding and weak. which poses a flood risk to communities downstream. And despite the reduced gas risk, many survivors have been hesitant to return, with some still living in resettlement camps. The fertile volcanic soil is a powerful draw, though, and families have slowly begun to move back to their ancestral lands, balancing the need for home with the traumatic memory of what happened. The chilling story of Lake Nyos introduced the world to a new kind of natural disaster. It's also a powerful example of human ingenuity in the face of incredible danger. But there are other killer lakes out there, like Lake Kivu, on the border of Rwanda and the Democratic Republic of Congo, which holds thousands of times more dissolved gas than Nyos ever did. The work to understand and disarm these silent threats continues. The night the lake suffocated, 1,146 people taught us a brutal lesson. Sometimes, the most terrifying dangers are the ones you can't see at all.